There's a strange paradox that seems to follow us throughout our spiritual journey: the more we chase control, the more we seem to lose it. And yet, the moment we open our clenched fists, the moment we surrender, something extraordinary begins to unfold. It's as though life, long waiting at the door, finally walks in when we stop trying to architect every inch of the room. I didn't always understand this. For much of my life, I mistook control for power, holding tightly to outcomes, relationships, plans, and identities like a drowning person clutching driftwood in stormy seas. I thought letting go meant giving up, relinquishing effort, ambition, or love itself. But what I've discovered is that letting go is not a resignation, it's a liberation. It's the sacred art of releasing the illusion that we were ever in charge of the tides. There came a moment, and perhaps you've had one too, where I found myself exhausted not from doing too much, but from holding on too tightly. And in that weariness, in that sacred stillness after the storm, I heard a quiet truth rise from within: you were never meant to carry all this. It didn't speak in words, but in waves that didn't crash but washed me clean. And just like that, I began to let go. What followed was not what I expected. It wasn't chaos, nor was it emptiness. It was peace, spaciousness, freedom, a kind of soft joy that felt like sunlight filtering through a window I didn't even know had been boarded up. This is a story about that surrender. Not the kind sung about in poems or whispered in temples, but the lived surrender, the gritty, vulnerable kind that cracks open the ego and lets the soul breathe. It's the story of how letting go became not a loss, but a return. Not a defeat, but a flight. And how, in the unraveling, I found something more whole than I ever could have assembled through effort alone. So if you're holding on tight to expectations, past wounds, identities, or the mirage of control, this message is for you. Because there's a secret hidden in plain sight: freedom isn't something we acquire. It's something we uncover when we stop clinging and finally let life flow. At the heart of letting go lies a deep alchemical truth: that surrender is not weakness, it is transformation. In the West, we're taught to grip tightly, to manifest through control, to make it happen. But in the ancient spiritual traditions, the mystics of the East, the sages of indigenous wisdom, and even the hidden teachings of early mystical Christianity, there is another way, the way of the open hand. Letting go is not about discarding what matters. It's about loosening our grip on what no longer serves the soul's expansion. We are conditioned to attach to people, ideas, roles, outcomes. We wear identities like heavy garments, each layer stitched with expectation and fear: the good daughter, the successful entrepreneur, the spiritual seeker, the perfect partner. These roles can serve us for a time, but when they become prisons, we forget they were never who we truly are. Letting go is the act of unclothing the false self. The ego resists this with all its might. It equates surrender with annihilation. But the soul whispers otherwise. The soul knows that what we let go of isn't lost, it is transmuted. Just as a leaf falling in autumn isn't a death but a renewal, so too are the things we release. They return to the great compost of consciousness, feeding the roots of our next becoming. There's a deeper force at work here, what some call Tao, others flow, or simply presence. It is the river of being that moves through all things. When we release the illusion of control, we don't drown, we merge with the current. Suddenly, we're not pushing against life. We're carried by it. And in that surrender, there is clarity. A stillness. A deep inner yes. Emotional freedom begins not when we suppress, but when we release the stories attached to our emotions. A heartbreak becomes not a scar to guard but an invitation to feel and to free. A fear becomes not a monster in the closet, but a lantern lighting the next step in the cave of our unconscious. Letting go teaches us that nothing real can be threatened and nothing unreal can survive the fire of truth. This is the sacred paradox: to truly hold life, we must release it. To truly be free, we must stop trying to be free and simply be. The deeper we walk into the unknown with open hands, the more we discover that we were never empty, they were simply ready to receive something higher. Throughout the mythic architecture of human consciousness, the theme of surrender shows up again and again, disguised in parables, etched into sacred texts, whispered through the lips of initiates in temples now long buried beneath sand and time. Letting go has always been a threshold, a rite of passage for those ready to cross from illusion to truth. In the ancient Egyptian Book of the Dead, the soul of the deceased stands before the goddess Ma'at, who weighs the heart against the feather of truth. Not power, not possessions, not even devotion, but lightness of being is the key to the afterlife. And what makes the heart light? Not achievement, but the absence of attachment. Letting go of resentment, of fear, of grasping, that is the soul's freedom. In the Sufi tradition, the image of the moth consumed by the flame becomes a metaphor for the self that surrenders to the beloved. It is not destruction, it is union. The moth does not die in vain, it becomes one with the light. This is the essence of spiritual freedom, not escape from life, but intimacy with the divine. Letting go is the sacred burning of all that stands between the self and the infinite. The archetype of the hanged man in the tarot also tells this story. Suspended upside down, he is not a victim but a seeker who has chosen surrender. His inversion is not punishment, it is perspective. Through sacrifice of control, he gains a higher vision. He lets go of the world's narrative and enters the space between breaths, between moments. There, in that suspended stillness, truth is revealed. Even Christ, in the final moments upon the cross, utters the ultimate act of surrender. Into thy hands, I commend my spirit. This was not defeat, it was transcendence. It was the moment when the finite gave way to the infinite, when letting go became resurrection. The symbolism echoes across cultures, the snake shedding its skin, the phoenix in its self-made pyre, the bodhisattva who renounces even nirvana to return and serve. Letting go is the sacred undoing that makes way for the true self to emerge. And it is not just in myth, it is in nature. The tree does not cling to its leaves in winter. The ocean does not mourn each wave that breaks. The moon does not fear its darkness, knowing fullness will return. So why do we resist this rhythm? We are beings of cycles, of birth and rebirth, and yet the mind clings to permanence as if it could outwit the universe. But the soul remembers. It knows that freedom is not gained by adding more, but by releasing what no longer belongs. Letting go is a return to our essential rhythm. A remembrance of the eternal dance between holding and releasing, inhaling and exhaling, living and dying and becoming once more. In this dance, we are not passive, we are participants in a sacred unfolding. Each time we let go, something ancient rejoices within us. Because in that moment, we cease to be just an identity. We become the mystery itself. Letting go is often spoken of in poetic tones, wrapped in metaphor and mysticism, but in the real world, it arrives in much messier, more vulnerable ways. It comes through the quiet decision to stop chasing someone who no longer sees you. It comes through deleting the number, releasing the plan, stepping away from the version of yourself you thought you had to be. In the day-to-day, letting go looks like choosing silence instead of arguing for your worth. It looks like leaving a job that drains you, even if you don't yet know what's next. It looks like setting a boundary that feels terrifying but true. It's not a single dramatic act, it's often a series of small, sacred choices that, over time, create space for a truer life to unfold. When I first began letting go in my own life, I thought it would feel like loss. But instead, it felt like air returning to lungs that had forgotten how to breathe. I noticed my body relax in ways it hadn't in years. My thoughts softened. I laughed more. I cried differently, not out of despair, but release. And for the first time in a long while, I felt, here. Present. Alive. One of the most radical acts of letting go was the moment I stopped trying to fix myself. So much of the spiritual path is entangled with the idea of improvement. But what if letting go is not about becoming better, but becoming more yourself? What if the healing begins not in striving, but in surrendering the belief that you are broken in the first place? This shift ripples outward. When we let go internally, our external world rearranges. Relationships recalibrate. Old cycles fall away. Space opens for new connections, opportunities, inspirations to flow in. It's as if life was waiting just beyond the door, but we had barricaded it with fear, memory, and false control. Practically speaking, letting go can be as simple and as profound as breath. Exhale fully. Release the tension in your shoulders. Choose a moment today where you say yes to life by saying no to what no longer feels aligned. These moments accumulate. They rewrite our nervous systems. They remind our minds that it is safe to surrender. They teach us that freedom was never about escape, it was about presence. Letting go is also contagious. When you embody it, those around you feel it. You become a permission slip, a living example that it's possible to live unbound. Your courage ripples through the collective, creating a subtle but powerful shift in the energy field around you. This is where spirituality becomes real, not just in meditation or ritual, but in how we choose to show up each day. Do we hold with desperation, or do we open with trust? Do we cling to the past, or do we allow the unknown to carry us into becoming? The truth is, we are always letting go of something. Childhood, moments, people, versions of ourselves. But the most powerful letting go is conscious. It is the choice to free ourselves from the need to control what was never ours to manage. In that release, we return to the flow of life. And in that flow, we discover that freedom isn't out there. It's here. It's now. It's in the space we create when we finally open our hands. There comes a point in the journey where we no longer crave more answers, we crave release. The soul is not searching for another technique, another doctrine, another roadmap to perfection. It is longing for spaciousness. For the silence that comes after the storm. For the unburdened moment when we can simply rest in what is. Letting go is not the end of effort, it is the beginning of real alignment. It is not the absence of care, but the presence of trust. And in that trust, something extraordinary begins to unfold. Life meets us differently. It no longer feels like something we must wrestle into submission. It becomes a partner, a mirror, a current that we can dance with, instead of fight against. Looking back, I realized the chains that once bound me were never forged from circumstance, they were crafted from the stories I told myself, stories of control, of fear, of who I thought I needed to be. And when those stories began to dissolve, so did the walls around my freedom. What replaced them was not emptiness. It was grace. And so I invite you now, not as a teacher, but as a fellow traveler, to ask yourself, what are you still holding on to? What weight have you mistaken for safety? What identity have you clung to so tightly that you forgot how to breathe beneath it? Maybe today is the day you put it down. Maybe today is the day you stop trying to fix, to fight, to force, and instead, you just let go. Not because you have all the answers, but because you're finally willing to trust the unfolding. Because you're ready to remember that your freedom isn't waiting on the horizon. It is waiting in this breath. In this choice. In this moment. Letting go isn't a single act. It's a sacred rhythm. A return to the self that has always been free beneath the noise. When we surrender, we don't lose ourselves, we rediscover what was always true. So exhale. Unclench your fists. Step softly into the unknown. And know, with every part of your being, that you are held. You are guided. And you are already free.